So we've hit the top of the hour, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is 5 clever ideas to improve contact center efficiency. So if you're expecting 5 clever ideas, you are going to be absolutely delighted today, because we're not going to bring you 5, we're not going to bring you 6, we're not going to bring you 7, 8, or 9. We are going to bring you 10 clever ideas to improve contact center efficiency, which is delightful. We're going to get 5 ideas from Lee Jones at the consultancy Elevate Performance. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, John T.
And you're going to look at 5 clever ideas where people can make a difference to efficiency.
Absolutely. So the angle that I'm going to take on it is looking at mindset, skills, behaviors. We're going to talk about technology, so we're going to come back to that point in a minute. I've got some views around some of the points being made. Obviously Frank's going to be coming at this from a technical angle, but I think, it's important to look at, although we're looking at different angles, actually, some of the efficiency is going to be achieved when you actually put the 2 things together, people and technology. So that's going to be where I'm going to be focusing, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, in addition to 5 ideas from Lee, we've got 5 ideas from Frank Sherlock at Core Miner. Is there a particular angle that you're going to take on your bonus 5 ideas?
I will be, obviously, Core Miner are a technology company, so I'll be focusing on technology. But a lot of what you hear from Lee about human behavior, language, mindset, skills will also overflow into some of mine. So I think you'll find 10 great ideas that combine technology and human behavior today.
Fabulous. Well, if anyone's not already logged into the chat room, now is the time to do it. This is not the chat box in Zoom. This is our own call center helper chat room. The address here, callcenterhelper.com/chat, or a very easy way to do it is this little speed dial we've set up on the internet. It's called cch.chat, and that will take you straight into the chat room. It is in a separate application currently. We have plans to integrate that into the chat room next year, the video feed as well. So the video feed's on one side of the screen. The chat room you can either have on the other side of the screen. If you've got a big enough screen, you put the 2 applications side by side. Or you can go into the chat room from your mobile phone, which then frees up your whole screen. The advantage of being in the chat room is you can download the webinar slides. There's quite a lot of detail on both Lee and Frank's presentation, so that's the link there to go off and download the webinar slides. We'll also be having, after the 5 ideas from Lee, and we'll be going to the chat room, looking at some of the stuff going through, and after the 5 ideas from Frank, we will be having a quiz. And to take part in the quiz, we use these little buttons at the bottom of the chat room. So if you want to be in the quiz, you can do it from there. We can also get your questions and your tips, put those into the chat room, and we have a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates, or indeed an Amazon gift voucher, depending which one you'd prefer, for the best tip, which will be picked live at the end of today's webinar. The team behind the screens will be picking the best tip overall. So that's what we've got planned for today. We're going to start off with a little warm-up poll, which will just appear on your screen. So type this into the little box on your screen. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is very high and 1 is very low, how efficient is your contact center? So on a scale of 5, how efficient is your contact center? 5 is very high, 4 is high, 3 is medium, 2 is low, and 1 is very low. This is an average score. You may have different ones on there. Lee, expecting a particular slant on here?
I don't know. I'm going to go middle of the road, I think. I think sometimes people could be a little bit critical of their own operation. Oh, there we go. I think, you'll always have some people, we run focus groups, and we'll have some people go and we do things brilliantly, and you get another group in and it's doom and gloom and everything's wrong. And I think that actually comes down to one of the points I'm going to talk about, which is mindset in a minute. So reality and mindset could be 2 different things. Yeah,
so I think medium is certainly the highest there, 74%, 17% say it's high, 1% very high. I guess there's an element of self-selecting if you're already highly efficient, you probably don't need to come to a webinar to get some extra ideas on it, though I think you're probably going to learn something even if you are in that top quartile or quintile. I think it's 5 of the chart there. So with no further ado, I am going to, and if you're not into the chat room, we've only got 70 of the 130 people online in the chat room. Just a reminder, type callcenterhelper.com/chat into your browser, or cch.chat. So Lee, would you like to take us through your 5 ideas of how we can improve contact center efficiency?
I will, John T. So thank you very much. So hopefully everybody can see my screen okay.
We can indeed, yeah.
So I've got a few slides to go through. We're going to put a poll in the middle to break it up a little bit once we've covered the first 2 points. So get a bit of a breather from listening to me at that point. So like John T. said, I work for Elevate Performance. I'm consulting director there. And at Elevate, we specialize in driving sales and service performance through basically the focus on people and behaviors. So it's all about conversation, behaviors, and mindset. So going to be talking with Frank, and like we said just a minute ago, we're coming at this from different angles, but actually, I think, some of our ideas are very aligned, and it just goes to show that in current times, technology and humans do work together and need to. I suppose at a time where customer anxiety and demand is heightened and contact center operations are disrupted with home working. I'm sure many of you are working from home at the moment. This is kind of ideal time for me to look at contact center efficiency and effectiveness. And I think whether you are an advisor, you're a manager, or whether you're in operations, I've got something in my 5 ideas, hopefully that's for all of you. And we've already mentioned that, when you bring tech and the human together, good results, great results can be achieved. And it's interesting, just a minute ago on the poll, and you were talking about, will there be more digital interactions next year and less calls? That's an ideal world. If you get technology right, then yes. If you get it wrong, you're probably going to have more people calling your center. Because if you're getting it wrong, then you're driving frustration and repeat calls. So, I think that just emphasizes where it's so important to get the 2 right. So I've already mentioned going to be talking about mindsets, behaviors and skills, and how it's about getting it right for customers and the skill of how we do that. So I'm just going to move on to my first slide. This is kind of what we were talking about. AI and machines do amazing things, but they're programmed by humans. So, investing in the skills of your people is still important. We need to be versed and skilled in the art of the conversation, because when we can program those tools to do the right job. If we don't have people that can converse with humans, people to people, then we're not putting the right kind of content into our tools. I think the other thing is, there's one thing true right now. We've got some amazing technology, but machines don't have emotional intelligence. And until we get there, there is still a role for the human. So that is the differentiator. If you're feeling threatened as a human being in a contact center, you have something that customers want. And, if we can tap into that well, we call it at Elevate, we call it the augmented human. It's machines and humans working in harmony. So essentially, that's our belief in the future. So if I just go on and talk about mindset then. Mindset is the first tip that I've got, because for us, if you haven't got your mindset right, then you can't get your conversation right. So mindset for us is the first place we start with performance of any organization. And the first mindset I want to have a look at is accountability. And accountability is interesting because you kind of go, well, I'm accountable or am I not? Do I switch it on? Do I switch it off? And we can all be accountable at different times of the day. We can be hugely accountable human beings, and we all sometimes drift into a place where we're not. And accountability, and our view on accountability, is about how quickly you get yourself back to being accountable. We all know that mindsets are a giveaway. Some people don't need to tell us something for us to know how they feel. And so your mindset and the position that you're in oozes out of you through conversation, through body language, and onto others. So before we work with any contact center, we look at the mindsets and accountability. Whether you can solve the customer's problem or not, it's about your influence. It's about saying, am I going to do everything possible that I can for this customer? Or am I taking a mindset into this conversation whereby, I don't care, I don't like this job, I don't want to be here. Well, there's things you can control. And the one thing you can control is while you're at work is about whether you take ownership for a customer. So accountability is huge for us. I think the second one is curiosity. So curiosity is interesting. I took calls in a contact center 20 years ago. I worked for a long time on the floor in a contact center. And I know what it's like when you take call after call after call and you hear the same thing being said by a customer. It drives you to a place of assumption. And we think, I've heard this one before. And the moment we think that, we sometimes switch off. And if I just bring up the third mindset, the moment I switch off, I'm not present. So to stay present is hard. It's a hard job taking calls in a contact center. Staying present all the time and being curious means that I don't assume the customer's problem. And guess what? When we assume the customer's problem, because I've dealt with this 20 times before and I know this, then we quite often drive repeat calls into the contact center because our first time resolution isn't right. So absolutely crucial that we assume we don't know the answer until we've asked the questions to find out the answer. Now, obviously in this day and age, knowledge management takes care of some of this, but this is about how we rock up to work and think about, I want to solve this customer's problem. I need to stay curious and I need to really, really listen. Listening comes with presence. Listening is a skill, presence is a mindset. So I'm going to talk about some of the benefits to these mindsets in a minute, but what I'll do firstly is I'll combine that with my second tip. And for anyone thinking, blimey, we're going to be here for about 2 hours, my first 2 tips do take most of the time. So the 3, 4, and 5 kind of build on these things. First skill that I want to have a look at. This is something that for us makes one of the biggest differences when we work in contact centers. And I'm going to use an example for this one. Appropriate acknowledgement is not saying sorry. Appropriate acknowledgement is making the customer feel like they're safe in your hands. And if I give you an example of this, we walked with one of the largest water companies in the UK. I'll keep them anonymous and I'll call them CCH Water. Now, CCH Water, I was listening to calls and I heard this very cool. And the advisor said, hello, Lee, you're through to CCH Water. How can I help? And the customer, let's call her Mrs. Jones, very animated. I'm not sure I'll carry that off, but she said, I have sewage pouring everywhere in my garden. I've had it now for 2 days. This is the 3rd time I phoned you. The smell is horrendous. I have candles burning to get rid of the smell. And I have to carry my children across sewage to get them to the car. It's disgusting. I can't take any more. And I'm worried. It's getting higher and higher. And the advisor said, I'm sorry about that. Can I take your postcode, please? As you can imagine, now that person wasn't present. They were in autopilot. That advisor was met with absolute fury from that customer. It felt like they didn't listen. They didn't care. And they just generally hadn't demonstrated that they were listening. So let's try it using appropriate acknowledgement. Hello, Mrs. Jones. I'm really sorry to hear that you're having problems. It sounds horrible and we wouldn't want that happening to any of our customers. My name is Lee. I'm going to do everything I can to get this solved for you. Now, can I just take your postcode to check that I'm speaking with the account holder? Because that may drive us to the next course of action. Now, there's loads of different ways of saying that. But what that says is, 1, I've appreciated that this is a big deal for you. And 2, I have listened and I've matched your emotion. And 3, I do need to take your postcode, but I need to do it at the right point in the conversation. Now, if people do what that advisor does, what we find is people get irate and they try and take control of the call. So I might have added 10 seconds, but in that 10 seconds, I have the customer where I want them. Now, if I hadn't have done that, then the customer will try to take control of the call. Have you heard me properly? Can you hear how annoyed I am, for example? So appropriate acknowledgement is really, really key. Signposting is where we demonstrate what's going to happen next in the conversation. This is really important because this is a call control technique. Because if Mrs. Jones is now trying to vie for space on the call and is trying to take over and say, right, I want to tell you X, Y, and Z, this is where you get in there first. So Mrs. Jones, thank you for giving me your postcode so that I can make sure we get the right solution, because this could be down to many different problems. To get me to the right solution, I'm going to ask you about 5 questions, and it's going to take about 5 minutes. But I assure you, I will then have a course of action for you. Would you let me answer those questions for you? Great. We've teed up and we've taken control, and we are now taking the customer where we want to take them. And that first 30 seconds, quite often we find sets the tone for the call. And quite often you can see a correlation between high CSAT and NPS scores and the first 30 seconds of how the call was managed. Those 2 are key for me. The last one, before we go into a poll, is next issue avoidance. Now, you can only do this if you have been completely present and curious. So this is at the end of the call. This is not saying, is there anything else I can help you with? Because quite often that doesn't drive a difference. If they had something different, they probably would have told you. What this is about is spotting the opportunity to stop them calling in another time or to educate. So Mrs. Jones, you mentioned that the water table was quite low in your area, and that I think the problem here was that water's getting into your manhole cover. Just might be advisable to get 2 of those little clips to lift your manhole cover. Here's a link. I can tell you where to get them on Amazon. And every week, if you just lift your manhole cover, check for water coming in. If it's above the sewage pipeline, then give us a call. We can get out to you and we can get this fixed before it causes a problem for you. Next issue, avoidance. So you see there's things that you can do that stops you saying, is there anything else I can help with, but proactively drive value for the customer. And there are massive benefits to those 2 points. Improved customer confidence means that customers don't phone back in trying to speak to somebody else. They don't take control of the call if you're confident and are hearing what they're saying. It gives you better AHT when you front load more control of the call at the front. And all of this leads to CSAT 5s and NPS 10s in our experience. So, Jonty's got a poll for you. And we're going to take a quick pause there before I finish off with my last 3 points, which will take about 4 or 5 minutes.
Jonty, you're on mute.
The question is, which of the following makes 0 difference to achieving a CSAT 5? That's a 5 out of 5 customer satisfaction score. So is it asking, is there anything else I can help with? Is it saying being personal and polite? Is it using the customer's name? Or is it all of the above? Which of the following do you think makes no difference to achieving a 5 out of 5 customer satisfaction score? So just give you a minute to digest and take that in. I think we've got most of the 146 people online voting. I'm just going to end that now, and I'm going to share the results. So Lee, looks like most people say top one is asking, is there anything I can help with? About a quarter are saying all of the above. 8% say using the customer name and being personable and polite. So put us out of our misery, Lee, and tell us the right answer.
Yeah, so I'm quite pleased, because I might have led people to answer A there by the last thing that I was talking about, but a lot of people have said all of the above, and absolutely. So in our experience, if you do those 3 things, you are not going to get a CSAT 5. That's not going to get you the CSAT 5. They are hygiene. Being personable and polite is a hygiene factor. You're certainly not going to get a CSAT 5 if you're rude, but things like appropriate acknowledgement, signposting, playing back your understanding for clarity, and using some of the other skills that we work with in our work will get you CSAT 5. The scary thing is that a lot of time we find that quality advisors are scoring quite a lot of emphasis on those 3 things. And what that means is feedback and coaching is targeted in the wrong place. So I'm going to move on. I've got a few minutes left to go through the last few points. So hopefully you can all see tip number 3. Really quick point, but it's really, really relevant. So tip number 3, this is more for the operational kind of people on the call. Now, we all know that knowledge management is really important. It's so hard in this day and age of cross-skilled agents, multi-skilled agents to know everything. So we can't hold on to every bit of information. However, if you are going to build knowledge management, it can't be as hard to find something that we deal with 1,000 times a week as it is to find something that we deal with once a week. So your knowledge management design must take into accountability for the stuff that people need to get their hands on fast and often. And if you can design your knowledge management around your core drivers and your maybe top 10 or top 5 core drivers, you will find higher adoption to your knowledge. And I'm sure there's lots of people that would agree with that on the call. But it kind of leads me into point number 4, which is that there's another way, as well as knowledge, that you get your advisors to switch off autopilot. So when we look at induction training in contact centers, it's amazing how sometimes we try to train everything or nothing because we rely on knowledge. And we go somewhere in between. We take the 80-20 principle and say, take your top core drivers and train, explain, and practice those things over and over, either in a training or an academy environment. And it's really important that you have a sandbox knowledge and CRM to do that. So make sure there is consistent practice in induction and afterwards around the key things that customers phone about. And the reason for that, it builds confidence. It's like when you learn to drive a car and you've got the pedals and the gear lever down to a T, you suddenly pay more attention to the road. And it's no different when you're speaking to a customer. And then last one is, I want to give something for managers. Our view in Elevate is that the role of the manager is pivotal. And sadly, we walk into so many contact centers and we see managers sat behind their screens and we see them doing their reports and looking at last week's data because they have to justify last week's performance, and they're in meetings. So if they're there at all or they're not, they're in meetings. And what we try to do is we try to get managers coaching, because if you take care of coaching and the input, it takes care of the number. And 3 really quick coaching principles that I want to share that we find make a big difference. So our coaching principle is called Explain, Show, Practice, ESP. You can't be a great skills coach if you ask the question, what else do you think you could have done differently? Because if the advisor doesn't know, they don't know. So what's the point in guessing? So to be a manager, you need to understand what good looks like for your people. So if you know appropriate acknowledgement is a key skill, then explore appropriate acknowledgement as a skill. Explain to them what it sounds like. Give a good example of what it sounds like. And then say, give me your version, play it back to me. That takes 20 seconds to do that. So if we are out of our desks and listening to calls and listening to conversations, a quick ESP could be a 20-second conversation. It doesn't need to be 20 calls that I've listened to in a month, all played back in a 1-hour meeting. And on that, we believe in shrinking the change. So you're going to get more performance improvement if you work with Timmy on appropriate acknowledgement for the next 3 weeks than if you give Timmy 7 bits of feedback to work on from 7 calls you've listened to. So the smaller the change, the bigger the difference. So with appropriate acknowledgement, the great thing that I could then do is I can then listen while I could be sat in my computer doing my data, and I could be listening out for the first 10 seconds of all the calls of my team, because I can listen to, if I'm listening for one thing, I can listen to many calls at the same time and stay present as a manager. And I could hear a really good example of someone doing appropriate acknowledgement, then walk over and pat them on the back and praise progress, or virtually pat them on the back. So when you're listening to calls virtually, give them a quick text message or WhatsApp, send them a chat message, say, well done, that was brilliant. Try that again for me. Let's catch up at the end of the day. So all of these coaching principles don't have to be saved up for your 1-hour meeting every month. These can be done in the moment and they can be done quickly. So that's my 5 tips. Thank you for listening. I hope people have got a view on some of that, and I hope you got some use from it. If you have a view, I'd love to talk. So you can drop me an email and give me your feedback of whether I'm talking rubbish or not. You can get into a conversation with me via email, or go to my LinkedIn profile and come and have a chat. I always want to hear people's perspectives on some of the things we talk about. So thanks for listening. I'll hand you back to John T. And yeah, hopefully speak to some of you again.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to do a little poll now of which of the 5 ideas that Lee presented do you think resonated best? Was it to do with mindset? Was it to do with the skills, for instance, the signposting? Was it being smart with the knowledge management? Was it getting your advisors to switch off autopilot? Or was it the role of the managers? For instance, the virtual pat on the back, which is one of the ones that I love. So gosh, the results are flying around all over the place here. Lee, let's put you out of your misery. Well, as a technique, recency, the most recent thing you talk about is what people remember, which is the role of the managers is being very key. So I think that's certainly a good takeaway to invest in your team managers, and also to probably invest in yourself, and very closely followed by skills and then mindset. So some great thinking on there. So that's absolutely wonderful. Thanks everyone for sharing that. Lee, does that tie in with your experience, or is it more even spread when you talk with people?
Well, it's interesting, is it? Because I think, when we can get a change in behavior for managers that come away from their screens and start patting people on the back. I mean, sometimes that's quite uncomfortable because they're like, my manager's never done that before. So it can sometimes be very different, but it definitely ends up in a better result. So I've got someone who's invested in me, and they're spotting the things I do well, as opposed to constantly bringing me lots of feedback on the things that I do badly, can always be a good place for an advisor, and usually drives a reduction in attrition when you get managers coaching, because most people work for their manager, don't they, not the business. So probably not surprised if people feel like that would be a nicer environment for them to be in if their manager was doing that.
Wonderful.
And
so before we jump on to the next 5 ideas, we're going to jump and have a look at some of the ideas and tips that have come from the audience. Absolutely packed full of ideas, this webinar. It's a bit like drinking from a fire hydrant. It could get a bit messy. Got so much information coming your way. So let's have a look at, Amanda says, recruit for attitude and aptitude. It's easier to teach information and process than correct a poor attitude or lack of ability. I don't think we disagree with that. I think this ties in with your first point, Lee, about accountability. We made sure all of our staff were well versed in the accountability ladder. I'm not quite sure what that ladder is, but if anyone wants to share a link or something with us, that would be great. Discussing it regularly in contacts. This helped to make sure there's less of a blame game, and we saw increased ownership in customer-facing interactions. Lee, I think that very much ties into your point.
Absolutely. So the ladder is a tool that we've used before. It basically says that people down at the bottom of the ladder rarely change things around them because they make excuses, sit and wait and hope for someone to come and make it better for them. And people, when they realize that actually nothing changes unless they change, then they find solutions and they make things happen because they take others on the journey as well.
So Gary with 2 R's, I think that might be Gary Gormley, says, show you care, cushion the response. So C is for cushion, A is for acknowledge the problem, R is for respond, and E is for explore the solutions. I think that was in an article that Gary wrote for us a little while ago. So some great feedback there. Frank, I don't know if you've got any ideas for Natalie, who says, how would you go about measuring your current efficiency?
Well, I mean, there's many different ways that people would talk about. If you just hold fire on that, I think I'll approach that from within my deck in a few moments. Yeah, I think there's
okay. Well, we won't spoil that. So we'll jump across to Norman, who says contact centers really need to get good at automation and core defection, or is that called deflection? Chatbots with AI during the new norm, with the focus of creating more efficient operations, not forgetting the human touch, as we still have most of our people working from home, and this has created a lot of stress on our frontliners. I'll take 2 more tips. Gemma says, measure customer satisfaction rather than AHD in coaching to make sure of tone, rapport, and energy is being monitored. Help with this. I think Frank's going to be touching on some of those points in a little while. And Miriam says, even though automation is important, the human touch is just as important, which I think was a point that Lee, that you made. When difficult decisions are being made, be very transparent with your staff about the process of automation and how it will impact them. So we've got lots more tips, which we'll jump back to in a little bit. But right now we've got 5 bonus ideas. So we've already had 5 plus all the audience tips. So Frank, would you like to put up your slides and share with us your ideas on how we can make contact centers more efficient?
Absolutely. Let me share my screen.
There we are. Just need to go full screen. There we are.
Oops. Hi, I'm just remarking, Jonty, that the lockdown hasn't done much good for me, has it? Looking at the picture there versus the picture today. Lee, that was a great presentation. Really insightful, and I think I'm going to build a little bit on that themes Lee mentioned about the augmented human, and I'm going to talk about how technology can help with some of the challenges that organizations have around contact center efficiency. A little bit about CoreMiner. CoreMiner, we're an engagement analytics company. If you think about the engagements that you're having with your consumers, whether they be on voice, whether they be on web chat, email, they're simply data, but they're unstructured data. What we do is we turn that unstructured data into structured data to give you actionable insight about where you should intervene, and you'll do that to improve agent performance, to drive better contact center efficiency, to get better business outcomes, to better manage compliance. So I could talk about vector clustering and AI algorithms and machine learning, and it's all in the background, but effectively we allow our customers to make use of the data that's locked within those interactions. So before I go into my 5 ideas, Jonty, I think we've got a quick poll. So
the poll is, what has the greatest impact on achieving optimal contact center efficiency? Is it average handling time? Is it measuring first call or first contact resolution? Is it supporting the system's operability, making the systems better and working? Or is it agent behavior? Which of these do you believe is going to have the greatest impact on optimal efficiency? Frank, this was one of your ideas, so I don't know if you've already got an idea of what you think might win.
I think, to build again on these themes, agent behavior, skills, mindset, I think that makes the biggest difference.
Indeed. Well, in fact, you're absolutely spot on there, Frank. 57% go for agent behavior, followed by first contact resolution, which I guess is avoiding repeat calls or repeat contacts, followed by actually average handling time is in equal last as with systems.
That's good to hear, because I think as we go to my first slide, average handle time. Does average handle time, is it a reliable measure of efficiency? It may be from one angle, but it's certainly not a measure of effectiveness. And so my first tip is to link the handle time with ideal outcomes. Different calls, be it a sales call, a service call, a claims call, a tariff change call, they all have different constructs. What constitutes a good call and a bad call should be related to the business outcome. Did we get the right outcome for the consumer? Did we get the right outcome for the business? Let me give you an example about why handle time doesn't really matter. A couple of months ago, I got a renewal for my car insurance from it came in the post 30 days before you renew. And yeah, the premium had gone up ever so slightly, not dramatically. I looked at a comparison website and, I can get it £100 cheaper. So I'd been with the same insurance company for 5 years, had a claim the year before, was really well handled, well managed. I wasn't thinking of leaving, but I thought I'll just ring up and say, hey, I've got a quote, but I've got another quote from an alternative source. So I rung up, the advisor answered, The phone went through the identification and verification, and I explained what the issue was. And he said to me, how much was the difference on the comparison website? I said, it was £100. Quiet for seemed like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And the response was, I don't blame you for moving, Mr. Sherlock, but I can't match that quote. Is there anything else I can do for you today? Now that, as a handle time, the call probably took 2 minutes. But as a business outcome, as a customer outcome, it was a really bad outcome. So handle time has to be looked at in conjunction with the outcome. And in thinking about that, if you look at the different constructs of different call types, they all have different sequences. Each call will have a slightly different component. Each call will require different agent attributes, different information to be provided by the consumer. And so when you use technology such as the call miner technology, you can really understand in forensic detail about what an individual call journey looks like, what an ideal outcome and an ideal handle time should be. Number 2. So quality assurance. This may be quite controversial to some of the audiences, but let me put it out there. What is the point in measuring, sitting and listening to 2, 3, 4% of your interactions a month, and then using that random sampling to try and coach agents, to try and provide business insight into products or systems or process inefficiencies? I would argue that there is little point. That it takes, in our experience, 2 or 3 times the length of a call to sit and listen to a call to score it. Therefore, it's just not scalable. But if you can use technology to analyze 100% of your interactions, to automatically score the components that you want scored, what that does is that it then releases the time, the inefficient time that you're spending listening to calls, scoring calls. It releases that time to allow you to coach the agents, to provide insight to the business, and allows you to have a really highly targeted, highly focused, but highly relevant quality assurance regime driven by technology. One of the things that never ceases to surprise me when we talk to customers and prospects is a lot of them don't understand why people are calling in the first place. They have, dispositions, and the agents may disposition calls. They may have 50 different disposition codes. Human brain, they'll always pick the ones in the line of sight. So quite often, one of the first uses of technology in order to drive efficiency and reduce human assisted demand is find out why callers are calling us in the first place, to explore what are the simple transactional calls that will be better serviced, better for the consumer and better for the business, better serviced by self-service channels. Where we've put self-service channels in with IVR, chatbots, etc., where are they breaking out to need human assistance? I was trying to pay my bill on the IVR, but it wouldn't accept my bank card, or it didn't understand my accent. Breaks out into the contact center. Use analytics to go back and fix them broken journeys, find out where they're happening and fix them. We often talk about, in this omni-channel world that we're in today, the omni-channel agent, the assumption that every agent is equally capable of dealing with every channel. It's simply not the case. That there are some people who are much better having one-on-one conversations than they are at dealing with 3 or 4 simultaneous web chats. There are other people that are less skilled on some of the conversational elements that Lee referred to, but are quite happy on web chat. So use analytics to find out which agents, which skills are better suited to which channels in this omni-channel world.
And certainly in terms of the dispositions that you said there, Frank, one of the problems I often see is that quite often you've got a list of dispositions, like you say, the 50 there, if you can remember all 50 of them, and then you've got to pick one of them. But the call might have been a service call, but someone says, well, can I've resolved that? I'd like to buy something else. And so is that a service call or is that a sales call? The agent has to pick one. Was the customer issue, but it might be the original issue wasn't resolved, but then they went off and bought something else as well at the same time. It's and that's one of the nice things about analytics. You can have this sort of, if you like, fuzzy logic on it.
Yeah, it's primarily called, the reason for calling might have been to inquire about a bill, but the actual call results in a tariff change, for instance, going on to a different package, and using analytics to really understand what's driving those conversations is it's a super benefit, and it's really important. It's contact centers are complex, consumers are complex, services, products, etc. are complex. Using technology to understand that call universe will enable that root cause analysis to drive efficiency in the right areas, not just automation for automation's sake. Silence. Dead air time that does nothing for your business, does nothing for your consumer, but cost money, adds friction to the customer experience. In any human interaction, if we were having a conversation, I wasn't presenting, there's a natural silence. The human brain works in a way that there's message received, understood, and respond. And that process, introduces silence, a natural backdrop of silence in any conversation. But where you have large periods of silence within these interactions that are happening in the contact center, it generally will be happening for at the agent level. It could be a training weakness. They're just not sure how to deal with that type of query. It could be one of the things Lee spoke about, a systems operability issue, that they're having to put the caller on hold whilst they look up information on systems, etc. But one of the easiest things you can do, when we talk about speech analytics can do many great things, one of the easiest things it can do is to actually help to identify where this silence is happening, why this silence is happening, and help you to eradicate the silence, to have less friction in the calls, and also drive better efficiency, allow you to handle more calls with the same number of staff, if that's what you require. So when people talk about some of the wonderful cases of speech analytics, often silence is overlooked, but I would say silence is a real driver of inefficiency in any contact center that we see today. So I think Lee touched on this point. Your people are your most important asset. Your people ultimately drive efficiency. Yes, your systems, your processes, help. But where we find ourselves today with contact center agents working from home, balancing perhaps homeschooling, maybe having technology changes, dealing with an ever increasing amount of vulnerable customers. The FCA a month or two back said there's 24 million people in the UK alone with one or more markers of vulnerability. So your agents that you've invested time and effort in are working under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, and it will, there could be telltale signs where this is taking a toll on the agents. And analytics is really good at being able to understand, are KPIs changing? Is there a tempo change in the agent's voice? Are calls shorter or longer than they used to be? Are outcomes being driven downwards? Are there higher levels of dissatisfaction? Is there less empathy? So when you can see these signs, it allows you to intervene, to counsel, to guide, to coach and encourage the people who are your best asset. And why does that tie to efficiency? Because it takes 3 times the effort to hire and replace a valuable staff member. And so if you're not taking care of your workers, especially in the current circumstance that they're expected to perform their duties, it will create a massive inefficiency in your operation. So use technology to get ahead of the curve and treat your people appropriately. So they were my 5 tips. But a closing thought on analytics, speech analytics, or omni-channel analytics. Often positioned as a sort of big brother to keep an eye on what's happening on the interactions. There's so much more you can do with technology today, and used appropriately, speech analytics should be a real component of business transformation and customer experience programs in your organization. Once you can unlock the data, uncover the insight at scale, act and remedy root causes driving friction in those engagements, the benefits for your staff, for your business, and for your customers are huge. So in terms of next steps, love to be able to spend more time talking. People know, Jonty knows me from a lot. I am fanatical about the subject, but CoreMiner's website, if you visit coreminer.com, there's a huge amount of ebooks, white papers, case studies. We have a guide around using speech analytics to drive contact center efficiency, which is a wonderful asset if you want to visit the website and download that. We're also happy for anybody on the audience today, if they'd like to see a demonstration of the CoreMiner solution and how that may work within your environment. We're happy to do that. So Jonty has a quick poll here, Jonty, about anyone who wants a demonstration, just click yes, please, and we'd be happy to help. So with that, Jonty, I am going to pass back to you, but thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to us today.
So thank you very much indeed for that, Frank. Some real food for thought there. So just do a quick poll. Which of Frank's ideas do you think was the most valuable for you? Is it linking average handle time with the ideal outcomes? Is it automating your quality assurance program? Is it understanding your call drivers? Is it looking at silence? Silence can speak volumes. I particularly like that one. Or is it being on the lookout for agents at risk? Well, Frank, I can see the voting coming in here, and I think it looks like for different people in the audience, all of them appear to be valid. I'll just share the results on here. Understanding your call drivers came up top there. I think ditching the disposition codes may be the message that to take home from here, but very closely. Be on the lookout for agents at risk, and also automating the quality assurance program. That's a classic one, particularly in terms of things like calibration and fairness. The bigger the sample you can get, the better there. So some wonderful ideas there from Frank, and some wonderful ideas from Lee. Well, we're going to now jump across, if I can get this up, and we're going to have a quick quiz. So I'm going to get across to our quiz room, and to take part in the quiz, you need to be logged into our chat room. If you're not already, I think we've only got about half the audience logged in, so there's still time. Go to callcenterhelper.com/chat, or just type in cch.chat, and at the bottom of the screen, once you logged in, you'll see these buttons, A, B, C, or D. I think we've got 73 people logged in so far, so cch.chat is the quickest way to get in there.
There we go.
Okay, so the first question is, True or false? The average number of customer systems used in the contact center is between 5 and 7. Is it A, true, or is it B, false? So the average number of customer systems used in the contact center is between 5 and 7. Is it A, true, or B, false? A couple of votes still coming in. And Rachel, do you want to share the results? Okay, the correct answer is actually false, which most people didn't get right. The figure's actually much higher. It lies between 8 and 12. Having to switch between so many systems can damage efficiency. So let's have a look at the next question. And that is, which of the following metrics is the best indicator of agent productivity? Is it A, occupancy, B, service level, C, schedule adherence, or D, utilization? So which of the following metrics is the best indicator of productivity? Just give you a minute to think about this one, because there is plenty of all of these. Which one is the best? Okay, Rachel, do you want to share the results? So the actual answer, which I think was the third choice of you, is schedule adherence. According to industry expert Daniel Ord, when advisors adhere to their schedules, service level will tend to stabilize, and that's what matters. This is a metric agents have a high degree of control over. Unlike a number of the other options, like, for instance, service level or utilization, the adherence is one that is very personal to the agent. Let's step the next question up. Looks like we've got Oliver in the lead. What percentage of contact centers admit their technology does not enable advisors to work in efficiency? So what percentage of contact centers think that technology is getting in the way? Is it A, 16.9%, B, 21.9%, C, 26.9%, or D, 31.9%? And the correct answer is, it is D, which most of you got right, 30%. According to a call center helper poll, we're going to put the link to the poll in the chat room, 31% of contact centers believe that the technology available does not enable advisors to work efficiently. And our last question on efficiency is, which famous author and thinker once said, efficiency is doing better what is already being done? Was it George Orwell? Was it Tom Peters? Was it Peter Drucker? Or was it D, Virginia Woolf? So A, George Orwell, B, Tom Peters, C, Peter Drucker, or D, Virginia Woolf. So just put the results there and we'll have a look at the right answer. And the right answer, which most of you got, or got the highest number got right, is Peter Drucker. Peter also had another quote, which is, management is doing things right, but leadership is doing the right things. Very profound there. So who's won? Well, it looks like Kieran just pipped Oliver there on the score. So Kieran, congratulations, and we're going to be giving you or sending you out a prize. So we'll be in touch with you very, very soon. So let's just have a look on the tips coming through, and hopefully, Rachel, can we see that on the screen? Not yet. Is it coming through now? So
no, you're sharing the wrong screen.
Sharing the wrong screen. Okay. Let's, okay. Which screen are you sharing?
No, you're sharing the chat room.
Okay. Let's have a look at get the right screen up. Apologies. Bear with. And okay, that should be working now. Okay.
Perfect.
Brilliant. So let's have a look at a couple of tips in from into the chat room. Gemma says, measure customer satisfaction rather than average handling time. In coaching, make sure tone, rapport, and energy is being monitored to help with this. Frank, very much tying in with your thoughts on AHD.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think tone, how the tone can really help. If someone is really monotone, laconic, slow, it can appear disinterested, and it just sets so I would absolutely agree with Jim.
So we've got a second tip in from Miriam. Miriam says, in fact, we've covered that one already. So let's have a look. Abdullah says, please could you give more examples on signposting? Lee, I don't know if you've got an example. One of the ones that I love is one that Carolyn Blunt used to talk about, which is that if you've got a reference number a customer needs to write down with, if you suddenly ask the customer to say, oh, here's the number in case you write it down. She says, well, if you know that's coming up, you say, well, in a minute, I'm going to give you a reference number, which you might want to write down. In the meantime, we'll do this, which gives people, while they're on the phone, the chance to go across to the pen pot and grab a pen. Any other examples, Lee?
Well, and it all depends on the kind of context of the call. So different industries have different types of calls, obviously, but it works really well when you're going to ask a lot of questions. I remember a particular contact center, they had a process whereby you move a customer from one product to another, took 15 questions on a system. If you don't signpost that right, you're just going to annoy the customer and make it an unpleasant journey. And you can use positive language to make that sound like that's just getting them the absolute right product for you. Or, you as a customer are so important to us. So I'm just going to ask you some questions, going to really make sure we get the right product, different ways of positioning it. But actually I was going to talk about the one you've said. So don't surprise a customer by 25 minutes in to all of your questioning, find out that they're now irate because they've missed their hair appointment. So, if you're, that would...
hair appointments, I remember those.
So last year then,
So Amanda says, get back on the phones yourself. Keep yourself in the world of an agent and advisor. Then you can coach with knowledge of reality. That used to be a lot easier when we were all in the room, because actually it could be very visible. Whereas doing it remotely is a bit harder than you can tell them. Neil says, to give our team a simple way of remembering to stay present and be curious, which is a point of yours, Lee, we ask them to tell their teams through Slack the first name of their favorite customer each day and a quick explanation of why they picked them. I think that's a wonderful tip there. And Frank, I guess if you can drill down and get the call recordings out quickly with that can also be a great one to share with people.
It is. It's all about coaching. What does good look like, and making sure that you use that to coach.
So a genuine conversation with your customer. Apply the Amazon approach to treat every customer as your friend. Don't apologize. Instead, say, I'm sorry. Karen has said, we use the EOS, not heard of this one, the Entrepreneurial Operating System in our company, from the director level down through every department. One agenda item is the Identify, Discuss, Solve system. This gives agents the opportunity to problem solve with guidance from the team leader. Real issues are then escalated to the next level if necessary. The team begin to take accountability. So Lee, you were very much talking about accountability.
I love that because you said we did can often go wrong if you don't reply and say what you're actually going to do about it. But that's another level on, isn't it? That's about going, brilliant, here's our view. Now, what else do you want to do to take it forward? And, mastery is a motivator in people. And when you can give somebody a bit of purpose in that contact center other than the day job, then suddenly, you start to drive discretionary effort in the job they're doing because they feel part of the system.
So I think
to a victim of leadership.
Indeed. And I think this next point ties in very nicely with Frank's discussion. Remove the AHT targets and empower agents to give great customer service and resolve the issue upfront. It may cause a longer AHT, but should reduce callbacks. I think that's all about measuring, Frank, outcomes rather than internal.
We see that all the time. That it is the bad or the questionable outcomes that drive the additional calls. So if you get a good outcome, you are efficient by default. You don't get the repeat calls. So yeah.
So that's, I'm afraid, almost all we've got time for. If you'd like to put into the chat room what you liked best about today's webinar, would be great. Today's winning tip comes from Andy33. Use an instant messaging program to send an agent a quick note to praise them if you hear them saying something good while they're on a call with a client. I think in fact, I think it's very similar to an idea that you had there, Lee, which is very good. We've got a simple little survey, 4 questions. If you'd like to fill that in when you leave today. The replay will be available in about an hour's time at callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And thank you to our 2 brilliant speakers today for the 10 tips, not 5, that we were able to deliver. Thank you, Lee from Elevate Performance. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
And thank you to Frank Sherlock from CallMind. It's been a wonderful webinar. Thanks for being with us, Frank.
Well, thank you to in the audience. Our pleasure.
Indeed. And to everyone in the audience, we're having our end of year break now, and we will be back in January. So stay posted to the Call Center Helper website for details on that. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you all again in the new year. Bye-bye.
Thank you.